You know, if there's still a little bit of light left inside and the eye and the inside has not become completely dark, there'll be a conscious wrestling match of between what's right and what's wrong, leaning towards what is right. But when someone has been poured out and emptied and there is nothing else remaining in them, then they are going to go after the thing that they know obviously turned over, so it makes no difference. If you would, I just want to touch on this and just go through this real quick. In verse 11 of Jude, it's kind of interesting. We read words. It just crossed my mind that I should open up the 26th translation and check out if one of these have yeah, some of them have. Okay, let me do this. Let me read the verse in the King James, and then I'll read from the 26 translations, then we'll look at the Greek. So, woe unto them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Korah. In the 26th translation, I'm really looking at the ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, running uncontrolled into the error of Balaam for reward, and abandoned themselves for the sake of gain to Balaam's error. For a profit they've rushed into the error of Balaam. They plunge into Balaam's error for gain. For the sake of gain they have rushed on headlong into the errors, plural, of Balaam. Led astray by Balaam's love of gain, they plunge into sin. Kind of interesting. But the few words that I was looking at that kind of, I don't know, sometimes you see things and you say, oh, that kind of strikes a chord with me. Ran greedily after the error. And ran greedily, it just says, and they went. That word can, one of the translations said, rushed headlong, or headlong, into the error. And the word for error being used here is the Greek word plane, like plan. And I was just reading that and I thought sometimes, you know, we need to take these words and retain them for other reasons, because when I've taught out of Ephesians 6 and I've talked about the methods of the devil, here is, again, these words that we tend to just, okay, error. But here, the Greek plane, like the plan, like as if it was preconceived or thought of in advance, the plan of Balaam. And the Greek word for reward is a common one, mistou. This version on my lap is translating for pay, which it can mean for pay. You'll find this word mistou is commonly used in, for example, let's see here. In Matthew, I think every time that there is a reward mentioned, same word, rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. So it does have the sense of working for wages, being paid. In the Gospels, specifically in Matthew, it's being used as reward, as the reward that we receive. But kind of interesting, because whether you use wages, Paul uses that, I think, in Romans 4:4, wages. Same word, but wages, not reward. Brings me back to the thought which many have kind of gone back and forth. There's no question in my mind that at the close of the passage where it says that Balaam said he was going to go back to his place, for some reason he didn't. And he was there with the kings of Midian. And that tells you that there was some unfinished business he probably was there to collect. There's no other reason why he would have been there. Otherwise, when it speaks of the reward or the wages, there would be a great disconnect, because in fact he didn't do in the first place what Balak expected him to do, which is curse. Instead he ended up blessing and saying, I can't say anything except what God tells me to say, and that is what I will speak to you. So it's kind of interesting, and it really is suggestive that all of the, as I said, the Haggadic exegetes, a lot of material that is traditionally from specifically 2 or 3 rabbis, but there's good reason to believe that they lead us to he was there amongst those individuals for no good reason, and in fact most likely to collect his reward for not, he didn't accomplish the purpose of cursing, but he obviously managed probably to say, hey, listen, I know another way that you can get these people to fall out of favor with God. Just bring on the women. In fact, if you think about it, it's almost like this is peppered through the book. Just bring on the women. Solomon, it's the women that turn his heart away from serving God. Sorry, I'm not sexist, but it was Eve in the garden. Sorry. So, you know, it seems like there is a pattern there, and so there's no doubt in my mind. And then the error, as I said, plani, reward, mistu, but there's one word here that says ran, well, it's actually 2 words, ran greedily. And this was, I kind of thought this was an interesting word, ekuthesen, which is usually being translated to be poured out or shed. For example, you get a sense of this word in, I'll do it here. It's good to have 2 different Bibles on your lap. Let's see. That passage in Matthew 26:28, this is my blood of the covenant. I'm reading the revised here. That which is for many being shed for forgiveness of sins, that being poured out, I think is what the King James says. That's the same word. So when it says they ran greedily after, they essentially, these that are following the ways of Balaam have essentially emptied themselves or have become empty in pursuit of reward. You know, if there's still a little bit of light left inside and the eye and the inside has not become completely dark, there'll be a conscious wrestling match of between what's right and what's wrong, leaning towards what is right. But when someone has been poured out and emptied and there is nothing else remaining in them, then they are going to go after the thing that they know obviously turned over, so it makes no difference. But I just thought those were interesting words that, you know, we just read the English, that these are words that actually add even more substance. Because if you think about it, here's a man who stood and opened his mouth, and out comes the words that God told him. As something, as I said, there's something not right. God is sovereign. God can use whomever he chooses. Think of the Chaldeans. But my point is, in this particular case, God used this prophet to get the message out, and including one prophecy that is still mind-boggling to wrap, you know, our minds around, a future prophecy, not yet, we're talking, you know, so far away from the event a star coming out of Jacob. But the main thing is that somewhere between him conversing with the Lord, or the Lord conversing with him and getting these words to utter, and sometime after the close of that, you find him back with the enemies. This is the thing that I'm saying, that if you connect those, it seems very obvious that something had to be emptied even of himself for him to wind up back there amongst those people, even after God spoke to him and essentially through him. Just think about that. And there's many examples in the Bible. I just thought that was an interesting thought, because we're familiar with these passages enough to kind of not really give them a second thought. But it's truly worth it when you figure out that, as I've said, no one is immune to temptation or to the wiles of the devil and his methods. And why wouldn't it be this way? You might say, well, maybe Balaam was evil from the get-go. We don't know. I don't think so, but who knows? That's not my business. I can't say. I'm not going to speculate. But what is certain is that he ended up back with the enemies. That tells you that something had to have happened along the way. Unlike other people, and there are other people recorded where they were going along one path and it seemed to be the wrong path, and then God intervenes and their path is, their course is changed. Just think of Zacchaeus. That's just maybe the mildest of examples to use of somebody who's set in a certain way, has an encounter with the Lord, and their path is changed forever, and their whole life is changed. So just an interesting little bit here on these words. I should say that I wish, this is equally difficult, the gainsaying of Korah. I'll just tell you that is an interesting translation and rather difficult. If I was translating the Greek, I think I would have a tough time trying to find the right words. And the Greek word for this gainsaying is kind of interesting. Anti-logia. Anti, against, logia. Think about it. Korah's rebellion spoke against Moses. It's very difficult when it says the gainsaying. I'm not really quite sure that that adequately sums up the issue that the Greek just kind of nails. Anti-logia, against the word, and Moses was the representative at that time of the Word of God. So anyway, some little gleanings out of Jude that I just thought would be interesting. And I have something else to share with you, so I want to change gears. I wanted to do this here, though, so that we're all, anybody who's interested in making little notes or large notes, this is a good time to do it. I want to take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk to you about something else completely different. So we're closing this chapter of what we're doing here. I need you to get on the telephone, reservations and commitments. Get busy.